Wild card weekend is over, so let's take our first look forward to the divisional rounds, of course, where we are down to just 2 games in each conference that we're going to find out who's going to be heading to the AFC title game, who's going to be heading to the NFC title game. And over the course of this video, we're going to talk about this past weekend, of course, super wild card weekend with a lot of upsets, a lot of disappointments. Then we're also going to take a look forward here, look at some of the odds for next week, and also look at some of the DraftKings lineups or potential lineups for next week as well. Let's get into it. Shout out to the chat who's here bright and early. Of course, my laptop unmuted as it always is. We got Go AZ Cards here, Justin, of course, our guy Tyler, and Steven Leibovitz. In honor of the stream, the Eagles sure squirted on themselves last night. Yes, a tough game, and I guess we should talk about the little wild card games briefly here, where the one thing that I wanted to be right, it was right. The Rams got eliminated. They, of course, had an outlier game from Puka Nacua on the way out. Of course, I'm sure a lot of you guys in playoff basketball, Puka Nacua definitely advancing at a pretty high rate. It's the highest scoring wide receiver of the weekend. But the Lions took care of business. Lions are the one thing that felt pretty good about this weekend. Of course, we're a team that I thought was a pretty good dark horse Super Bowl contender. That pathway for them got a lot easier with Dallas getting eliminated. Of course, now Detroit going to get a home game coming up the divisional round as well. But the other things that I would say are key takeaways, obviously Green Bay throwing all over Dallas was unexpected for sure. We talked a lot over the course of this year about Jordan Love, how he's been getting better, how a lot of the data looks better for him week to week, and also some of the film guys out there. Of course, we talked a lot about the JT O'Sullivan QB school. That was one that gave me a lot of faith in my Jordan Love shares down the home stretch, as well as just playing him in DFS, how he's looked better in the pocket, how he's looked better getting the ball out, a lot of snap on his passes when getting it out of the pocket quickly. And that's something with Jordan Love that we saw that rear. I wouldn't even say it's ugly head. It reared its beautiful head against Dallas. Of course, I'm a lapsed Cowboys fan, so part of me kind of sad, but something fitting about both the Eagles and Dallas going out fairly limply, as both teams did this weekend. Philadelphia last night, definitely an upsetting game, I think, to watch for both the DFS parts. We actually had a few David Moore lineups that did not have the right guys at captain. Rashad White, who once again, despite me warning you guys, I didn't warn myself enough. Played some Rashad White at captain yesterday to try to capture those Bucks heavy builds that we talked about in the showdown video. That did not go well, but the Bucks overall, a dominant performance against the Eagles. Eagles really the most 1-2-3 Cancun team of it all. Felt like they've had bad juju. An Athletic article came out this morning as well, kind of talking about how the Eagles felt like it was a little bit of a fait accompli, that they were going to be eliminated. Jalen Hurts did not feel the most confidence down the home stretch. So a lot of bad things, probably some changes coming to Philadelphia on the offensive side of the ball. Definitely you would hope on the defensive side of the ball, where Matt Patricia gave up basically 30 more yards per game than Sean Desai did, playing defensive coordinator. Of course, I love coordinator talk. It's one of the things here that we do enjoy in the offseason. But that Eagles loss is one that really, and obviously here in the Philadelphia area where snowy today, schools are closed, so all the Eagles fans get to really be at home dealing with their children like we are today for my family. They all get to be sad and moping around, having to do more work while dealing with the snow. So it's going to be a tough offseason here in Philly, but I would think that some changes have to be made there. See, taking a mental health day for all my Eagles bags. Yeah, that's tough, man. I would say for me, in terms of what hurt me the most in playoff basketball and did advance a few teams, got wiped out on DK, which is not a shocker, of course, given how the frustration, the pain points you guys probably saw with me drafting those playoff basketball drafts. But did advance a few, or actually a pretty good amount in underdog, but I have no faith in any of them because a lot of them are Dallas focused. A lot of Buffalo still floating around, but I have Dallas, I have Miami, my Detroit teams, a little bit of advance rate there, but it's not even something I want to review on stream because it's just, by heart, you guys probably could tell, I did the playoff basketball stuff because I think we have to do this part of the content cycle. I do think there's an edge if you want to go whole hog for it. But last year, I gave up so much of my BBM top 200 winnings, as well as just in general, putting in probably more money than I had to playoff basketball. And it was like, fuck, man, I got wiped out. Granted, last year was a bad year in terms of the bye week teams making it. You had to build really unique constructions that also probably had a little more wild card guys in them to make the teams advance. This year, it's I probably built better teams, but I didn't want to spend as much money on it because I think playoff basketball, variance, pod luck, more of a thing perhaps in playoff basketball than it is in regular season basketball. And I would say for me, I didn't get the joy out of it. It didn't spark joy for me. Of course, we will be back in the regular basketball streams coming up in about 3 weeks, I would guess. But for playoff basketball, I hope you guys had success with it. I hope we gave you guys a little bit of an edge here talking about it on stream because I think the approach is there, but it's just it sucks, man. I advanced so much Dallas stuff and it's useless. My Dallas Buffalo team's useless. Anything I have is Dallas Ravens team, I think is advancing, mostly useless as well because I didn't have the full Raven stack with it. That's sort of the tough part, I think, of the playoff basketball that was trying to articulate as we went, but I just, it is what it is. Buffalo, KC, 4-1 builds, all I have left that are live. So next week, that's half. Yeah, look, the KC win, definitely a nice one. Rashee Rice, I think a player that probably didn't talk about enough as a guy who consolidated his role and had even more opportunity, where McCole Hardman got a lot more work because Kadarius Toney being out in that game. But Rashee Rice is the one who was getting trusted, who's getting a lot of work, a lot of drawn up targets as well, close to the goal line, seemingly more involved than Travis Kelce is at this stage of the game, and kind of think that it would not shock me. Jason Kelce, the Eagles offensive lineman, retiring. Of course, he and his brother Travis doing that podcast. Don't think it would be a huge shock for Travis Kelce to retire too, just based on how we're seeing him go. But that game was one where Miami was obviously the bigger story. Miami did not get anything done. And I really did think Miami, all the Sklansky bucks is how I feel about Miami, where they were really underdrafted in playoff basketball. Tua was under 5% owned or under 6% owned in the DK Big Tournament this weekend. I had some Tua shares, as I talked about I would. It went terribly. It was bad. The running backs were bad too, which is not a thing we normally see with Miami. They just didn't get into range to score points. The only thing that hit was one of our bets on Probably, where we had the under on 6.5 kicking points for Jason Sanders. That hit very easily, so that was a positive thing. Besides that, though, the Dolphins, I think, would be, for me this weekend, the biggest disappointment. I guess besides the collective will of people in Buffalo to shovel a stadium, that would be a big disappointment too. But I think Miami not showing up at all, the biggest disappointment for me this weekend. Definitely a situation for Miami that I felt like they were just undervalued, and I still think they were undervalued, but obviously the results kind of make you believe that maybe the markets were right. Same thing about the Eagles. Like, maybe the markets were right about it. And I think as DFS players or people with that sort of game theory mind, my tendency is to always want to lean in, especially, the showdown brain that I've built up here over the course of now a couple years, doing those every showdown, a couple showdowns a week. So I'd say that the game theory of it all, I still think the Eagles and Dolphins were good plays in terms of the ADP, but the results are awful. Like, the results are bad. And I think everybody who did fade the Eagles, I just don't think it was like the best move. I think the Eagles could have won that game. There was a point where they were within one score, before halftime, and it felt like it could have gotten better, but just the will wasn't there. And for the Dolphins, I have to admit, the Dolphins were just not in that game at all. Like, they just barely showed up. And if I were the Dolphins, I know Mike McDaniels, people ask, like, are you going to give up play calling? No, he shouldn't give up play calling. He needs a better QB is what he needs. I mean, obviously they need a better defense too. Losing Bradley Chubb didn't help that defense. Definitely got worse from that point on. And another year of Vic Fangio being defensive coordinator will probably be a good thing for them as well, to get another year in the system and all that. But I think for Miami, like, it comes down to QB. As I said before, like Jaden Daniels, you put him in this offense. And obviously, I don't think that's what's going to happen. But, like, you put a guy who can run, who's going to take advantage of the run plays, where even Tua had some wide open lanes to run this weekend. Have a guy that can run, can threaten the run, can run the RPO, can be that kind of player, I think would be really good for Miami. I think Tua, though, contract stuff coming up for him. They may end up paying him just out of inertia. So that's something where kind of the inverse of Jared Goff, where Jared Goff has probably earned his next contract. Tua hasn't earned that next contract based on how he played down the back half of the season yet again. And he's probably going to have to get that extension, because otherwise they're rebuilding and they're not a team that they can rebuild. So interesting stuff coming up. Tush push season is over. Yes, or what do they call it? The push sneak is what Joe Buck was calling it, which my wife was like, oh, I hope they don't keep saying tush push. And I'm like, I think they're going to say tush push or brotherly shove. And I guess she prefers brotherly shove. And then she was like, push sneak, which is actually the most accurate name to call it, because it is a QB sneak with a push behind it. But she did not like Joe Buck calling it the push sneak. And I'm sure out of all the, the branding now, the tush push is the brand. I think tush push is one to go with. NBA, MLB, NHL playoffs were still really easy to edge last season. Onto the way too early. Yeah, okay, I get it. Look, other sports, if you can play them, worth it. NBA, I still play. But obviously, your mileage may vary. Probably going to take an early drafted team to take down the gauntlet when Jacksonville was steamed. Yeah, Jacksonville, another team that did hurt me a little bit, because I got some of them on some of the stream drafts we did. Jacksonville didn't make it, and that's the risky play when you are drafting early and you don't know what teams are going to be in. And frankly, you should have been drafting Jaguars, because they had a 99% chance to make the playoffs, and then they, of course, blew it in catastrophic fashion. What else to talk about here? I guess the coronation party for CJ Stroud's the other main thing. And we'll look at the bracket here, and I'll remake my picks again, because frankly, Cleveland didn't win. So my picks are off from last week anyway. But Cleveland, that upset there. I think the one thing to take away from that game with Cleveland, and it's going to be the case this week as well for Houston, when you have a QB that drops back that much, I think in DFS, and I think in general, me doing this content, I'm sure a lot of people doing the content even more so, we're all over Joe Flacco. I felt like Joe Flacco was going to be over-owned. I still played a good amount of Joe Flacco, though, so didn't take that to heart enough. But I think when you have with Joe Flacco, it's like you have a QB that's dropping back 45 times a game, sometimes more. It's just that opportunity allows a lot for the defense. So Houston's defense got there because Flacco, the things that made Flacco great was that he was dropping back, having so many pass attempts. He then dropped back so much again. Obviously, the game script as well made it have, so he had to keep dropping back. but then they got advantage there, took 2 touchdowns from him. Like, that's something where I think we sometimes look at the positive side of the equation a little bit too much and not the negative side. Same thing for, I guess, the Cleveland defense, where Cleveland's defense to me was one of the best of the year. Like, I think it'd be hard to say that. They did have some flaws where I talked about this in the past. I don't know this much this year, but definitely in previous years of Splash Play. Like, if you have a defense that's like really good between the 20s and then they get in the red zone and they're not good, that kind of is a sign of something that's bad there. Whereas like the Patriots are a team where they've had some years where they were bad between the 20s and then they get in the red zone and it stiffens up. I think that red zone thing is like kind of a key tell for, is this defense like really going to keep doing it, of course, through every situation over the course of an entire season, or are they going to wilt when it's time to do it? And I do think Cleveland, like them being that bad in the red zone, they talked about during the game too, where they gave up a lot. They were the worst team technically in the league in the red zone in terms of the EPA metrics, as well as just like, I think the numeric counting stats that they're talking about in the broadcast. It's like for Cleveland, they had some weaknesses and they also did not come ready to play CJ Stroud ball. Were a lot of single high safety in that game. So CJ Stroud has picked that off, kind of made it work for himself. And obviously got downfield to Nico, who I might need to adjust my priors on with Nico. I still think he's being driven by CJ Stroud's success, but he was doing more in that game than I feel like visually I've seen him do in terms of the route running, in terms of some of the physicality as well. Obviously, he's a big guy. We know that. But Nico impressed me in that game. And I think really he's probably going to have, I mean, it's a really low implied total. We'll talk about that in a minute for Houston. But it's a low implied total, but I think Nico, having the target concentration, the one thing I worry about is I think next year he goes a little bit too high because Tank Dell's going to make that leap from year 1 to year 2. And Nico's going to probably be like a 3rd round pick, maybe late 2nd in terms of best ball. I think that's going to be an overdraft of Nico. But that said, like he looked better here. I just think that he's still mostly a vessel of the offense. And he's going to do well if he's going to concentrate targets. But if you have Noah Brown in and healthy, of course, Noah Brown on IR and out the rest of the playoffs, Tank Dell already out the rest of the year. So it's now down to Nico and Robert Woods and Dalton Schultz. And like, they even got that touchdown of Brevin Jordan. So like, he's willing to spread the ball around and go to guys that aren't Nico. But I think that Nico's going to benefit from the target concentration as long as Houston's around, which might just be one more week. Houston skipped the red zone part with their 70-yard TDs. Yes, that's true too. Again, the single high safety stuff was really baffling for a team that's like a good defense. Jim Schwartz, a guy that's been around long enough to know that like you don't play into the one thing that CJ Stroud's abused over and over again. And it also, frankly, has made me think that like I have a lot of data in my data sheet. Of course, if you are a paying member here on Splashlight by hitting that join button down below for under $5 a month, you know all the data I pull into the sheet and how many different things I'm looking at in terms of man defense, zone defense, how guys do 20+ air yards, how guys do in the slot versus out wide. All that stuff. I think the one thing I've been missing is like, what do QBs do and what defenses are being run the most? And like, is it cover 3? Is it cover 1? Like, I think those are things that I do want to pull in a little bit more next year. I'll see how much effort I have, given that I didn't even fully color code my sheet this year because I just didn't have the time to do it or the mental bandwidth. But I think that's one thing that really stood out in that game is like they played into CJ Stroud's hands, which is baffling given how good the defense was. Let's see. Good morning, senior Spags or senior? I'd prefer senior unless we're saying like a high school senior or a college senior because I'm so cool and you guys are just a freshman. They jam your heads in the toilet. The variance of football is what makes it attractive. Is a lotto ticket. NHL is a wild playoff run. You could win by structuring the right team together. People overdraft high seeds in NHL and MLB. Yeah, I mean, the variance of a single game MLB, I'll never forget that from DFS. It's possible I do some more MLB stuff this year, which depends on, frankly, if anyone's paying me for MLB. The MLB, I remember like there was a period where I was doing MLB content daily for Stochastic, where it's like every day it's just, the team that won last night is the team that stacked against the chalk pitcher. every night was what it was for one stretch. Obviously not literally every night, but basically. And it's just one of those things where NFL gonna be variant game to game too. And we saw it. I mean, the amount of upsets we got this week, really crazy to see. Lots of hellos here. Good to see all you guys in here. Of course, hope you guys are enjoying your snow day if you're getting it. Other games to talk about here. Again, the Rams falling off, I think, was one that I just was not surprised by. Puka did the best he could. Cooper Kupp kind of cooked a little bit, I think. Just not the outlier player. Puka's taking a leap ahead. The volume's there for Puka. Kyron Williams as well. We kind of saw the bad side. One of the guys in the Deposit Kingdom Splash Play channel had mentioned me going like, hey, all the stuff you talked about with Kyron Williams' EPA not being that great. Kind of see it with the eye test. And Kyron Williams ended up being like on the year a plus EPA rusher. And I think we really saw that like some of those back half of the season games where he was running for his life in some of those games, really creating value in the run. In the pass game, though, like he was kind of heralded as a pass game back. have not really seen him have that juice in the past game. And it does feel like a lot of the Rams' success is going to other guys, whether it be, Puka, whether it be Cooper Kupp, whether it be Demarcus Robinson, who frankly I think looked better than Cooper Kupp. I think the Rams to me were really the case of like the inverse of what we talked about with Philadelphia and Miami, where the public got so frothy for the Rams. I said it over and over again. I know a lot of you guys were Rams backers as well, but like they were just so overvalued for what the team was. And kudos to them for getting the results they did this year. But that was like the luck box year of all luck box years, including the fact that Puka, being a 5th round pick and coming in and doing that, like that's just crazy to see. So the Rams got tremendous results this year. Kudos if you got them. If you got guys like Kyron and Puka to drive your value, of course, we're parts of a lot of winning teams out there. But I think in the playoffs, it's like people were really trying to make up for not having them in the regular season. And it's like, yeah, you don't do that. It's not how you play playoff basketball, I think. Pittsburgh and Buffalo, the last game that we haven't talked about at all. Just ugly. Like Pittsburgh, I think, has acquitted themselves well. It seems like Mike Tomlin, tired of answering the questions about if he's going to be back or not. He is currently, I believe, a lame duck coach or a free agent, one of the two, but basically can force a separation between himself and the Steelers if he wants. And obviously there are a lot of attractive jobs out there. Atlanta interviewing Bill Belichick, Chargers interviewing Jim Harbaugh. Kind of feels like those are the two leading spots, though Dallas, a wild card for Belichick, it seems, if they decide to move on from Mike McCarthy. For Pittsburgh, though, it's hard to imagine Mike Tomlin not coming back. Like that's team, he's gotten better results than any coach over the course of like 20 years. So obviously, the championship runs of Belichick can be a difference maker there. But in terms of just the reliability of every year having winning seasons, so a bit of a downer if that's how Pittsburgh goes out. Kind of a decent showing from Mason Rudolph, but probably like as good as Mason Rudolph can be in that kind of environment. Buffalo wins easily. I'm still not like wowed by Buffalo, I think is the main thing from ever since they changed offensive coordinators. Like this is now not a fun offense. Josh Allen looks really efficient and is definitely running the ball aggressively. But besides that, it's like they're not feeding Diggs. Shakir is involved. Kincaid's involved. But like nobody's really, I think, scaring you. I guess what scares you is just the ability to spread the ball around or run it with Allen or get some good success running the ball with Cook. Or in that game, we had Murray and also had Ty Johnson and Leonard Fournette inactive in that game. So was a good bet. Got voided because he wasn't active for the game. Wasn't called up from the playoff or from the roster, practice squad roster. Buffalo, I don't know, man. I think that Buffalo's one of those teams where they could win it all and it wouldn't shock me, I guess. But I feel like they're just kind of wasting time right now where they're going to go into this matchup next week against Kansas City. Would it shock you if they lose to Kansas City? No. Would it shock you if they beat Kansas City and lose to the Ravens? No. I don't know. I know that we have a lot of Buffalo fans. Of course, our guy Sammy, who always brings a positive energy here that I appreciate, loves Buffalo War Pigs and all that. I just think the Bills, to me, I don't know. It's a snowy game, and they dominated it. But like, I just am not impressed watching them every week. Like, good job. You beat the Steelers. What do you want for that? Who's getting oversteamed due to this first round? Aaron Jones, RB10 and BBM5. I mean, he shouldn't be given how old he is. I would say who gains from this one? It's Nico, I think is the big one. I think Nico gains a lot. I would say Jordan Love is now probably going in that 2 range where he was going this year. Maybe, honestly, would it shock you if he goes in that Trevor Lawrence range or a little bit behind that? I think it wouldn't be the craziest if we see Jordan Love make that leap after he was one of my favorite cheap QBs this year. Nothing advanced with Jordan Love for my portfolio, which kind of bummed me out. But Jordan Love, I think, really probably making a lot of money for himself. Like he's getting, I mean, they have to extend him because he's in a lame duck year next year because of the contract he signed before the season. But like they have to extend Jordan Love for probably $180 million, I would think. Assuming that Jordan Love, doesn't want to play one more year to get even bigger value. But I would think they probably are going to extend Jordan Love in a major way. And I think he's going to probably be a 6th, 7th round. I would say 6th to 8th round QB would be my guess. Who else in the playoffs has played them into a better ADP? Rashee Rice, I think, is now probably top 70. He's probably going where Kadarius Toney was going last year, if not higher. I think he's a guy, and it probably is justified unless they bring in another star receiver or a high pedigree receiver to take some of that burden away. Curious to see where Jalen Hurts goes next year because based on the markets being so down on him, I think that's one. But I'd say the biggest rise for me is probably Nico. I would say Nico, Jordan Love. I think that's probably it. Those are probably the main ones. And Rashee Rice, I would say, not that far off. All right, let's look at these brackets here. Let's make some more picks. Then we'll look at the lines and all of that. If I were to pick a winner between Green Bay and the Niners, I think you have to go Niners here. Green Bay, though, horseshoe up the ass kind of ability and luck. some of the throws by Jordan Love in that game too, like really back foot throws, like dimes that really felt like they were in his bag, but not like a core part of what he was doing. But he was hitting those over and over and over again. That said, there's so much pressure that the Niners bring. There's also such good defense of the secondary the Niners bring. Hard to imagine them having that success versus Niners team that hasn't fallen off, that got better after the trade deadline. Cowboys were not as good. They lost Diggs, and ever since that, it was kind of downhill for them, even though they did mostly maintain their numbers. I think the Jordan Love thing ends. I would say Niners move on there, even though it would be fun to see them get one more win. You're getting Ship My Money or Neil to come hang or use probably. Neil feels like a perfect for probably bets. I don't think Neil bets at all. I actually don't think either of those guys really bet at all. But yeah, I've talked to both. I've talked to Adam. I haven't talked to Neil actually, besides like a supportive tweet. But look, I think that it'd be nice. I know that those guys, especially Adam, I'm sure will get a lot of different offers. Neil seems like he's building his own channel. So, look, I focus on my stuff. If people come to the table and want to do stuff, I'm always happy to do it. But yeah, I would say I would pick Niners to advance in that one for sure. We got the Bucks and the Lions. This one's kind of wide open. Do you think there's a Lions one? I think the Lions are now getting their best possible run out, getting one more home game, getting to not go outdoors. Potentially will not be going outdoors at all. Like if they were to, or outdoors anywhere bad, because if they were to face the Packers in the title game, they'd be going to Detroit. If they were to face the Niners in the title game, they're going to the Bay Area, which is, this is like as good as their summer at this point. So I would say for the Lions, it's probably a pretty big win. But I think obviously the Bucks going to pose a challenge. Bucks can certainly make some trouble, but it kind of feels to me like the Bucks are one and done. I don't think this is where the Jared Goff disappointment ends. I think also, maybe that playoff winning the one game in Detroit is like a little bit of an inhibitor where it feels like they've achieved it all because they won that one playoff game and Jared Goff's getting cheers and he belongs in Detroit, says Dan Campbell after the game. But I think this Lions team is going to make a run here. And frankly, if we were doing a draft right now, I mean, I thought this before the wild card too. Lions still a team that I think stacks up cleanly, has a lot of guys that can produce, a lot of guys that can score touchdowns. I think they can make the Super Bowl. I think they can win the Super Bowl. It's going to be tough if they face the Ravens, but I think they could. So Lions, to me, probably my favorite team, which I'm sure based on how this goes means that they're going to get wiped out by the Bucks and an embarrassment for Detroit. Eminem will be hiding his face. Is how that'll go. On the AFC side, I just don't think Houston can do this again. I like Houston. Obviously, Houston does a lot of things that I talk about as being important for your QBs, things that you want to see. They throw it downfield. Stroud even runs a little bit now, tries to at least keep them honest with that part. But for Houston, like they beat Cleveland's defense up. The Ravens are not going to come in and be surprised by anything at this point. Got to think Baltimore wins that one, and I would think they win it easily, though the market's going to say that as well. So that's definitely not a contrarian take by any stretch. Chiefs and Bills. That one's going to be tight. I think that game kind of goes down to the wire. Chiefs certainly looking like the best version of themselves last week against Miami. They're going to have to go into Buffalo here, which, as we saw this weekend, could be very adverse conditions, or saw yesterday, I suppose. Part of this 3-day weekend. That's now a 4-day weekend if you're a parent. But I would say for the Bills, I kind of think the Bills win this one. Not impressed by the Bills, but I don't think they're fucking up very much right now, where the Chiefs, I think, very much have the ability to screw up in their pocket. I would say we get to a Ravens-Bills Super Bowl there, or the AFC title game there. I would say a Lions-Niners pick for the NFC. I would say that then, are we getting the chalk? I think the chalk outcome is still the one. I think it's still Niners-Ravens, but I would be willing to go Lions-Ravens. But I think the Bills are going to meet their end at some point. Can't pass up Mahomes at plus money. I think that's a fair take to have too. Underdog, I think will certainly look good for Kansas City, but probably not a big enough underdog to really add a ton of value. Winner of KC versus the Bills is going to the Super Bowl. Man, that would be a Ravensy thing for them to run hot and be the front runner all year, but they've just come through in every possible situation. The one thing that could be a little bit weird for the Ravens, Todd Monken, their offensive coordinator, of course, was a reason that we were really big on the Ravens in the preseason. And obviously, you could give a lot of success here compared to how this offense is run, compared to the previous Greg Roman teams. Greg Roman apparently might be the Bears offensive coordinator coming up. Well, that's neither here nor there. Point being, though, is like, I think that there could be some distractions going on with the Ravens just because of the fact that you are interviewing for other jobs. It's not a great thing to have your focus a little bit divided. So that's the one thing you could say. But if we're going just off of how these teams played all year, the Ravens were the better team. The Ravens looked a lot better in every possible situation. I would think that for that situation, it's like the Ravens are that team, I think. But obviously anybody can win. We just saw it this week. Chiefs with a walk-off field goal. I'm curious because the way you guys are talking about this, I wonder if that's going to be a popular take and that makes the Ravens a little bit undervalued as a result. But obviously the Ravens are favorites in every betting market for a reason. Let's look at the Super Bowl odds. Let's look at the odds for next week. And we'll look at DraftKings briefly as well here. And guys, if you can, smash that like button. Of course, trying to cobble together content here every day, talk about stuff coming up here, and without actual DFS slates to hit on and really get into. So support the show here. Please do smash that like button. And of course, subscribe down below. And of course, if you want to join the Squirt Squad under $5 a month, get all of my data, including the rookie stuff. Tomorrow I'll be covering more rookies. I believe rookie running backs will be the topic du jour tomorrow. And we'll cover tight ends last, though. Am tempted to dig into Brock Bowers early because I think Brock Bowers will be the guy that really excites me and makes me want to cape for rookie tight ends once again this year. But we'll be doing the rookie preview tomorrow, so join us for that one. Of course, QBs and running and wide receivers we've already hit, and they got some good takes on. All right, so odds for these games coming up. So we got 45 implied points for Houston and Baltimore, 17.8 implied points for Houston, 27.3 for Baltimore. So market's expecting a boat race here. What can Houston do? They have to get the ball downfield on the year. Baltimore giving up only a 25% completion rate on throws of plus 20 air yards, only a 67% completion rate overall, which is not good, which would be a bottom tier mark in the NFL. Negative 0.2 EPA per dropback, negative 0.23 EPA per pass. It's not great going against Baltimore's defense. CJ Stroud, though, is a world beater and a guy who can create that production no matter what. But I think he's going to run into, the Michael Jordan versus the Pistons spot, who's somebody else had to overcome. I guess the Bills, the Bills every year spot where you just have to overcome the thing and you can't do it. You're not ready yet. I think that's where we're going to see CJ Stroud be this weekend. And hopefully he gets better from it. Hopefully he learns from it. The Houston should not be ready to make a real run based on the talent they have on both sides of the ball. But you give them some more weapons next year, give them some more defense next year. Hopefully Houston will be more live to make a run on kind of a Bengal style, Joe Burrow style run, as I think we're going to see from CJ Stroud, but probably not in this game. Green Bay, San Francisco, another one with a gigantic favorite. Green Bay, 20 implied points. Niners, 30 implied points. 50 implied total in this one. So obviously a big favorite here for the Niners. Niners should be able to take advantage of this Green Bay defense. Why Dak wasn't able to, I don't know. During that game, it was really weird. The announcers kept over and over again talking about CeeDee Lamb and Dak. Just, boy, vibes are off today. It was like they heard something in the production meetings and just kept repeating it, like something they shouldn't have known. But something was off with CD and Dak in that game. For this one, though, we know there's nothing going to be off for the Niners. We know they're going to find ways to get Ayuk the ball if they have to in those spots. If not, they're going to have lots of cozy touches to CMC, maybe some big plays to Kittle. Lots of ways they could beat up on Green Bay here, and I think that's the main thing. Green Bay, I hope, makes it feisty. I hope puts up a good fight because I do think Jordan Love has made a lot of tremendous strides. I mean, numerically as well on the year. His pressure rates, like to start the year, he was giving up 1 point basically every time he was getting pressured. He had over a 1 EPA or negative 1 EPA, on pressure plays. Now he's down to a negative 0.25 EPA on pressure plays. It's actually a pretty good number. By comparison, Brock Purdy, negative 0.13, and he's got one of the best marks in the league. So I would say for Jordan Love, he's made the strides. He's done a lot of work. Obviously, has the weapons around him that are going to get better next year. I think Green Bay, much like Houston, it's interesting that both these games are on the same day because they kind of feel like the same game. It's like this team's a little bit too young, a little bit too not ready for this, but I think that hopefully they put up a good fight. Jordan Love turning the Allen accuracy corner has been wild. The accuracy for him still a little bit lacking on the year, only a 64% catchable ball rate. So that's definitely something that is a flaw. But the issue is not the issue. The positive part is that he plays analytically the way you're supposed to, where he's failing a little bit on those completions, but he's getting deep shots. He's taking, in terms of deep throws, 4.2 deep shots per game, 0.3 EPA could definitely be better, but still getting a good amount of deep shots out there. That's the thing for Jordan Love, where if you're going to miss, you want to miss big. And I think too, then you're going to hit big when you hit, and that can sort of balance out the inaccuracy, but definitely does stand out, like a very low catchable ball rate from him that he needs to improve on, I would say. Could be a little bit of a scheme thing too. Kittle could be in play. Ferguson had a huge game for Dallas. If memory serves, Ferguson did have a huge game. He had 37 PPR points, so went off there. The CD Dak dynamic was strange. They were yelling at each other on the first drive. It was weird because I know they cut to that one scene of it, but it didn't feel like it was yelling. It was like Dak kind of talking to him a little bit, and CD looked out of it. I thought was the thing. It felt like CD didn't want to be there based on the reaction, but it didn't seem like it was enough to harp on throughout the entire game. It was kind of odd, but Dallas, Dak then caped for Mike McCarthy afterwards, did not want to see him go. I don't know, man. I don't know. You could keep losing in the playoffs like Dallas has and keep it going, but we'll see. Tampa Bay, 48.5 implied points in Tampa Bay versus Detroit. Tampa Bay's got 21.3 implied points. Detroit's 27.3. So decent favorites here for Detroit. I don't want to be a chalk donkey, but I'm a Detroit believer. I think that they are a team that I worried about kind of coming into this year, being crowned a little bit too early with how they knocked out the Packers last year. They came in really high ADPs, high Super Bowl odds and all that. And they just keep showing it week after week. Like they keep showing up. Obviously had that one bad run where Goff was playing outdoors for a bunch of games. But I think, they figured things out using Gibbs, using Montgomery. Montgomery did get a little more work in that game as a playoff back like we expected. Amon-Ra, though, very reliable target. Jameson Williams, Josh Reynolds doing their part, especially Josh Reynolds in that game. Laporta looked, I thought, very mobile for a guy coming off for hyperextended knee. Didn't get the same workload he normally gets, but did get a touchdown in that spot. So Sam Laporta, I think, good. Detroit, good. Hard to believe for me that Detroit can't get a lot of production here against Tampa Bay, who we know struggles against the pass, struggles in the middle of the field, struggles in all the areas that Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown know how to attack. I think it's really chalky for me. Baltimore, San Francisco, Detroit, but I think these totals here all feel pretty good. Green Bay's a run funnel, and Tony Pollard is clearly not a running back. I mean, he had a good game. He had one of his best games of the year, so I wouldn't be mad at Tony Pollard, though. One of the rare cases where both backs from the game do pay off, where Aaron Jones had the outlier day and Tony Pollard had a good game coming back. But of course, if you have CeeDee Lamb not quite getting there, Brandon Cooks also not getting there, that opens up enough production that if the production doesn't go to those guys, it has to go somewhere. So that's where Tony Pollard and Jake Ferguson obviously really benefited. Kansas City, Buffalo. Look, unless we're going to take a full chalk one, I guess this would be the spot that you go to Kansas City and assume that they have it figured out. Kansas City, we know the championship pedigree. Buffalo has struggled against it. If ever there's a year for Buffalo to make a run, this is it, especially if we do see maybe Todd Monk get a little bit distracted because of the job stuff. I think that's a possibility, but for Buffalo, one field goal favorites here, -2.5. What are the implied points in this game? 22 implied points for Kansas City, 24.5 for Buffalo. I think the Chiefs can win it. Seems like you guys are very bullish on the Chiefs in chat as well. How would the Chiefs win this one? Buffalo doesn't play a lot of man defense. Well, I guess that's a good thing for Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice on the year, 2.7 yards per route run versus zone compared to 1.7 versus man. Also 2.2 yards per route run versus zone for Travis Kelce compared to 1.9 versus man. So probably a good thing for the Chiefs receivers to be going against the Bills team. It's not going to play a lot of man defense. On Buffalo's side, facing Kansas City does play a good amount of man, a 32% rate, which would benefit Stephon Diggs the most, though he's pretty flat versus man and zone. 2.1 yards per route run versus man for Diggs, 2.1 yards per route run versus zone for Diggs as well. But he's the only guy who's good versus man defense, so maybe a better Diggs spot. Diggs a low ownership this week? I would have to think so. Though his price tag is down to $7K flat, so that might be cheap enough. Worth pointing out, too, going to look at DraftKings in a moment. The DraftKings slate, it is a 4-game slate they're trying to do. So they're trying to do a Saturday to Sunday one. So keep that in mind, as it is going to make it more of a late swappy slate for some of the pros out there. It's also going to make it so you have to pay attention if guys get ruled out. If a guy like Leonard Fournette, you think he might be active, then he's not active. That's something you're going to have to watch out for. But something to keep in mind, you're going to have to be paying attention between Saturday and Sunday playing that main slate. Yeah, for Buffalo, look, I don't think there's any strong advantages here for Buffalo. I guess the Chiefs D has been bad versus the run. 0.02 EPA per run play allowed there is what the Chiefs D is giving up on the year. Buffalo's defense, though, has been beatable too. I think you could talk me into either side. I think just out of the lack of upsets that we've picked so far, where I love Detroit, don't want to see them upset, think they should win, even though Tampa Bay probably puts up a good fight. Niners, Baltimore, they're just too much better. I think too much of a talent disparity against the two young teams there in Houston and Green Bay. This one has to be the one we take as an upset. So I guess I would take Kansas City relative to that, but you could talk me into an all chalk week, and I think that's probably the right week. All right, let's look at the DraftKings stuff here, and then, of course, we'll hop off. We'll see what we can do. I'm not going to enter a lineup. Let's just go through position by position and see what we got here. All right, so QB, we got Josh Allen as the highest price, 8K salary for him. Lamar, 7,900, not that far behind. Josh Allen, though, the running of the ball is really something. Again, 15 rush attempts like we talked about last week in a semi-do-or-die game. It actually ended up not being a do-or-die game for Buffalo, but they did really lean on Josh Allen there in a way that I think does portend what we can expect in some tough spots, more competitive games that we saw versus Pittsburgh. But even that one, I mean, that game wasn't competitive really past the second quarter, I would say. Still got 8 rushing attempts in that one. Pittsburgh, though, again, a team that put up a fight at the end, but I don't think Josh Allen had to run as much in that game. Lamar Jackson at number 2, a little bit cheaper. Of course, Lamar, we know, big upside everywhere. You have to think, too, that Lamar might put the pedal to the metal a little bit more, knowing that Houston can come from behind, that Houston is going to keep attacking downfield. Obviously, that can also get away from them as well, where if Baltimore gets a few takeaways, we then probably see the Ravens just run out the clock and not play too aggressively. So I think Lamar comes to the real risk point at 7,900. I think if you're playing him, you kind of want to play into a Texans shootout because you have to see Houston put up points, or else like the Ravens just going to run the ball down their throat. And I think that's definitely a risk profile. Incoming Ty Johnson active watch. Yeah, that was an odd one. I think they didn't want to waste Lenny's practice squad days, because if they call him up, then at a certain point they have to add him to, have to sign him to an actual contract. So I think that's why that happened. But it was odd after they did have Lenny active and seemed like they were getting him back in the mix over Latavius Murray in week 18. Patrick Mahomes, again, the game for him, not that great. We really haven't seen great fantasy games for him on the year. Only one game over 30 fantasy points the entire season. So for Patrick Mahomes, I think if you're playing him, we'll see what the ownership is, but if he's going to be low owned, I think he's an interesting play. If he's going to be high owned, like he just hasn't performed that well, but still a positive EPA player on the, actually, no. Wow. So Patrick Mahomes actually a negative 0.02 EPA per pass guy on the year. Still a 0.03 EPA per dropback. So because of his ability to run and create some value on the run plays, he is still adding value per dropback. But per pass, I think this actually might be the first year in his career. He's been a negative EPA per play passer. So that's not great for Mahomes, but would think in this spot, you still want to see the Chiefs have some production. He's, $1,200 cheaper than Josh Allen. I think for Patrick Mahomes, I get it, but I'm not the most excited given the fact that we just haven't seen that upside very often. Stroud, if he's going to be low owned, you're going to play into Baltimore being upset, obviously going to have his own value there. Stroud, though, big games, again, over 20 points again. Still not putting up a lot of games over 30, as the one against Jacksonville, the one over 40 against Tampa Bay. But I think that's it for him on the year. So not that slate-breaking upside. Again, the running QBs, they are priced accordingly because these guys, we all know, 30-point upside, potentially 40-point upside in the right game script. Josh Allen and Lamar priced accordingly. Brock Purdy, 6,500. Another guy who gets there if the offense is just scoring a lot of points. Would think as well. They're very live to put up 4 touchdowns early in this game because Green Bay's defense is just not very good. Brock Purdy, I think, to me, a more interesting pivot, I think, than Mahomes and Stroud, because I just don't think Houston's going to be able to win that game. And Mahomes, I don't know. They run enough with Pacheco. I don't know that Mahomes has like 5 passing touchdown upside. You make the same case for Purdy as well, but obviously they do have a little more ability to check down near the red zone to McCaffrey. Like, I think there's ways that Purdy can have a 5 touchdown day that isn't just him taking production away from the run game. So Purdy, I think, kind of interesting at 6,500. Jared Goff, another guy who the lack of running does make it tough to find that ceiling, has hit 30-point days against our much-hated, much-attacked Denver Broncos defense. I believe that's his only 30-point day of the year, of course, when you needed it the most in the fantasy best ball playoffs and all that. But Jared Goff, the upside is there. Only 15 points this past week, though, in a competitive game. You probably need to see Detroit put up a lot of points. They can against Tampa Bay. Goff didn't play to me. I think that playing guys like Goff and Purdy are going to be your best lever against Allen and Jackson. But it all comes down to the ownership. We'll see what those guys have. Jordan Love, again, same thing as Stroud. You have to really be believing that the Packers can win this game outright. But again, he has enough production here. He's a guy that's just over 20 every game as well. Not a single game over 30 over the course of the year. So that floor, a little bit more appealing than the ceiling. But Jordan Love, I think a tough play to get to. I'd rather get to Goff and Purdy in game scripts. We do expect those teams to win. Baker Mayfield, he had 30. I actually didn't even realize he put up 30 yesterday, but had 30 points yesterday. Has actually hit 30 more times than a lot of these QBs. Hit 30 twice on the year. That's more than Jared Goff, more than Purdy, more than Love. Interesting to see. Baker Mayfield going to be under own. I think Detroit wins that game, but there's still a world where Tampa Bay can be very productive in fantasy, and Detroit winning that one. So interesting to see. Blame MVS entirely for Mahomes. MVS and Tony, I guess. I mean, you can. Rashee Rice has been a positive EPA receiver on the year, 0.31 EPA per target for him. The guy you should be blaming, I guess, is Sky Moore. Sky Moore negative 0.36 on the year. Obviously, he's still out, I would think. Though I think he's getting close to being able to come back in. He's probably not coming into much of a role if he comes back in at all. All right. McCaffrey, got to imagine going to be a chalky play against Green Bay. A lot of opportunity for reduction for him. A little bit of risk, too, with that calf injury. Definitely could be a risk point where they do give the ball to Elijah Mitchell more just because they don't want to run McCaffrey into the ground when they're probably going to need him in the next 2 rounds. I mean, they're they're going to need him in the next 2 rounds if they advance. So McCaffrey, 8,800, I think will be chalk. I think a risky point there. Aaron Jones, I would imagine the ownership comes down a little bit for him. I think an interesting play as a lever against it. Obviously, Aaron Jones, though, not likely to get production in a game where they are playing from behind throughout it. They're not using him too much in the past game, definitely not as much as Aaron Rodgers did in the past. So Aaron Jones, I think, in play, but it feels like that game he put up last week is probably going to put a lot of people on him, and I think you're only playing Aaron Jones if you think the Packers upset this one. Jahmyr Gibbs, not a great game for him, but in full point PPR, he can make it work. Had the 1 touchdown, but only 8 for 25 rushing. Caught 4 targets, 43 yards, so a good game receiving for him. But really, the playoff run for Montgomery is going to be one that I think really hurts a guy like Gibbs, where Gibbs just needs those touchdowns. He needs that red zone work. He's been getting down the back half of the season. I don't think they're going to trust him as much. Montgomery, I think, a little bit more trusted there. And for him, the workload a little bit higher in the run game, 14 rushes compared to 8 for Gibbs, as we just saw. The red zone work going to be higher as well. I think Montgomery, not an exciting PPR play, but the guy you look at who can get you 2-3 touchdowns. I think Montgomery, a nice tournament play. Cook, the workload's been a little bit harder to hit for him, but did get he got over 20 touches in that game. Almost got 20 rushes in that game. We got 22 against Pittsburgh this past time out. Josh Allen running more takes a lot off the table for Cook. But Cook's still a valid play for sure at 6,300. Rachaad White, I mentioned it yesterday. You just keep seeing a lot of Edmonds working in high leverage spots. That's not great for Rachaad White. Rachaad White's still the better back, but he couldn't get there, couldn't get 10 points in a really positive game script yesterday against Philadelphia. I don't have a ton of faith in Rachaad White. I feel like he keeps getting owned. Again, another guy that people didn't have enough of during the regular season, so now they're flocking to him at every chance they get. Rachaad White, I think, will project well as well. Rachaad White, to me, I just think the role is not the same right now, and it hasn't been the same for like the past month, basically. And he's still getting enough work that, like, you look at the counting stats, he's getting enough rush attempts, but you keep seeing Edmonds in there. It's not a great thing for him. Because the whole thesis for Rachaad White is that he's going to get you a potential for 30 touches in a game. He's not even getting close to that. And they're definitely not good touches right now. Pacheco, we looked at him, or I guess we could look at him because we did not look at him. 24 rushes here, 1 target, 25 touches overall in that game. Pacheco, the workload's been there for him. At a certain point, McKinnon will be back in. And I don't think it's this week, right? I think it would be next week. He could come back. I spotted using crutches as of the 10th, which is not a great sign for Jerick McKinnon. So yeah, Pacheco just locked into the role. CEH did not look great in the snaps that he got as well. So Pacheco, probably the most sure thing. And if you think Kansas City wins, which it seems like a lot of you guys do, Pacheco probably a core part of that. Mitchell at 5,200, probably not in play. Justice Hill at 4,800 is an interesting play because they protected him in that last game. They did not have to have him go. He was still active, still got some targets at weird times in that game, but it felt like he was definitely ahead of Gus Edwards in the pecking order in terms of how these guys were used. They did seemingly want to give Melvin Gordon the touches, but then Melvin Gordon fumbled in week 18. And then they went to Gus Edwards because they know Gus Edwards wasn't going to give the ball up and mess up that way. I think Justice Hill at 4,800 is a very live play. Obviously, the workload's been a little bit hard to pin down. I don't know. I think McKinnon's done. Okay. There we go. I mean, if he's on crutches again, if he's on crutches 8 days ago, not a great, or 6 days ago, not a great sign. Gus, obviously in play as well. $1,100 cheaper than Gus Edwards. So like Steven is saying here, that could make Gus Edwards a more appealing ownership play. Tough to say. This Ravens rushing game has been very hard for me to pin down, which is one of my pain points because I thought that J.K. Dobbins would be getting this amazing year with both Gus Edwards and Justice Hill's roles rolled up into him. And instead, obviously, Keaton Mitchell, who's out for the year too. But instead, Dobbins gets hurt early, and now it's like, who do we pick in the backfield? I think I prefer Justice Hill, but in a game where like Houston is safely behind, you're probably getting Gus because like you need Justice Hill for explosive plays. For Gus, you just wanted to protect the ball, get you some short runs, and not cost you anything. So those are the game scripts. I think those guys have the most merits. Dameon Pierce not involved at all now. So like if you are trying to get cute, play Dameon Pierce. It is fully Devin Singletary's backfield, which is another take that feels very good in hindsight that we had in the preseason. Amon-Ra St. Brown, this is really the matchup for him. I think Amon-Ra can go for 175 in this game, and I wouldn't blink an eye about it. Obviously, possible he becomes chalk. We'll see what the projections look like later in the week. For Amon-Ra, though, 8,200, highest price wide receiver on the slate, and PPR especially. I think that Amon-Ra, hard to fade this week because the matchup against Tampa Bay is just too good. We could talk about it a little bit more briefly here, but Tampa Bay's defense on the year, 0.01 EPA per dropback, 0.01 EPA per pass. On throws under 20 air yards, a 72% completion rate, good for a 0.14 EPA. On throws over 20 air yards, it's where they really get killed. A 44% completion rate, a 15% touchdown rate, and a 0.5 EPA per play on throws of 20 plus air yards. So Amon-Ra, we know the volume's going to be there for him unless Tampa Bay really gets pressure on Goff over and over and over again. And that's the case. The Lions are probably losing. Amon-Ra to me is probably the safest play, but also one that could put up 40. I mean, maybe not 40. Could put up like 30 plus on the slate and be a must-have. So Amon-Ra to me, we'll see what the ownership is, but he looks like the best play on the slate at wide receiver to me. Debo, obviously a fine play as well. 7,700, very tough to get there. I think that, again, we got to see what the projections are. There's a chance that Amon-Ra ends up over-owned and Debo ends up under-owned, and then Debo just puts up one of those monster games against a Green Bay defense and can't stop shit. So Green Bay at 7,700, watch out for that. I hate the price point, but that's what's going to make him an interesting tournament play. Mike Evans against Tampa Bay, or against Detroit rather, had a really bad game against Philadelphia. Also obviously dropped the long bomb pass. It could have been a touchdown. Killed me in showdown. Unfortunately, had some nice lineups that could have gotten there if Rashad White and Evans were better, and they were not. But Evans, obviously we know the workload is there for him, the opportunities there for him. Baker looks for him downfield the most. So Mike Evans, a fine play at 7,200. And again, another pivot point to Amon-Ra St. Brown, though. I think you'll probably see a good amount of Amon-Ra St. Brown lineups with Mike Evans as the bring back. That would be my guess. Nico Collins' price tag didn't really move very much despite the game against Baltimore. Nico, though, again, 7 targets, probably had a ton of air yards in that game, would be my guess as well, given that he almost had one more long touchdown in that game. But 96 yards, 7 targets, 6 catches, caught the touchdown as well. Don't know that Nico ends up as owned as he probably should be relative to the opportunity and how, frankly, his box scores have looked very good with the injuries in this wide receiver core for Houston. But Nico here, I think, I just think the field's going to go to Amon-Ra is how I feel about this. So Nico probably less owned than he should be, but we've talked about Houston, like definitely a risk point going to Houston here. Amon-Ra with Trey Palmer bring back for max leverage. Or David Moore. Honestly, David Moore was really involved in that game in a way that shocked me early on. Obviously caught the long touchdown. It's going to make the box score look pretty. But he's getting a lot of routes. So I don't know. Trey Palmer, though, we'll see. Trey Palmer, again, another touchdown in a day where he tweeted, "I'm pissed." Whenever Trey Palmer tweets that he's pissed, that actually apparently matters for fantasy football because he scores a touchdown in those games. Keep it moving. We got Diggs here. Diggs at 7K. Ayuk at 6,900. These two guys maybe get a little bit forgotten on the slate just because of the price tag. We'll see what the projections are, though. If Debo isn't coming up a lot, and I don't think he will at 7,700, Ayuk might come up a little bit more at 6,900. The tough part with Ayuk, though, is that they really need Green Bay to be competitive, I think, for Ayuk to have the outlier day. But he can have 2 first-half touchdowns, I suppose, and that's the way that they put the beating down on Green Bay as well. But I think I would favor Debo in a game where Green Bay gets destroyed. I'd favor Ayuk in a game where Green Bay is being competitive and they kind of have to keep moving the chains, because that's where Ayuk is going to excel. Rashee Rice, big game for him, over 30 points PPR wise. I guess 30 flat is what he got against Miami. Workloads there from Kadarius Toney coming back in would probably cut Hardman's routes down. I don't see any way that cuts Rashee Rice's routes down. Going against Buffalo, Buffalo's not been great out wide since they lost Tre'Davious White earlier in the year. Still, though, let's see, 0.06 EPA, 28% target rate allowed out wide, which is where Rashee Rice is mostly playing. He does play out the slot as well. Slot-wise, a little bit tougher matchup against Buffalo. 0.07 EPA, 43% target rates to the slot, which is actually low relative to general slot targets in the league. I like Rashee Rice. I think people will chase that game, though. So, yeah, I think that's fine. I think really, though, if you're not playing Amon-Ra, you're hopefully getting 3 of these guys in this range of 7K-ish and below. I think that's it. Jaden Reed, I have to point out, just the worst game. 0 flats for Jaden Reed this past week. But hopefully we'll get him back on track against the Niners. I don't really have a lean between Dobbs and Reed. Dobbs definitely deeply involved here. Have to imagine he's going to get some vestigial ownership from that. Dobbs was so unowned in that last slate that, I don't know, like he was just a good play because he was unknown. And of course, then he comes through in a big way. I played a lot of love stacks and didn't get a single Dobbs, which bummed me out because I think that's one of the things with Sims that frustrates me. And if I were to ever, get into the DFS tool space, what I would try to make is a simulator where you get, if you're like, hey, I want Jordan Love stacks at, whatever, a certain threshold of ownership or ROI, you get the stacks and it's like, oh, you have one with Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft. Here's one with Romeo Dobbs and Aaron Jones. Oh, here's one. Like, instead you have to do that manually. And it's something to keep in mind if you are doing the sim lineups like I do. But just something that's a pain in the ass because like Dobbs is lower owned, similar price point. He's a logical pivot because you're not thinking that through. You're like, I'm getting Jordan Love. He's low owned enough. And Jaden Reed's been better than Romeo Dobbs in basically every game across the year. You're not building the best tournament lineup sometimes. And I think that's something that I would say, again, check the link in the description if you want to save 15% on stochastics tools, including that Sims tool. But just keep in mind that it's not like, even when you are manually selecting things and going through, you have to really go through with a fine tooth comb, even for the things you're manually doing. And that's something that's been a pain point for me. And I think part of my frustration with this year is like, I've gotten a lot of things right in a macro level. And it's like, oh, you got the Houston stack right, but you picked, I don't know, you picked Tank Dell over Nico Collins this 1 week, or like, whatever the case may be. It's like, that's sometimes what the Sims get because you're just getting those top projected plays within a stack over and over and over again. Jameson Williams for value. I'm kind of done with Jameson Williams. Like, he always projects well. Of course, I'm saying that now, so I'm sure he'll go off. And again, Tampa Bay does defend deep balls very poorly. But Jameson Williams is not loading for some reason. All right. I don't know. It's, there's loaded Juwan Jennings instead. All right, Jameson Williams. Has he had a game over 15 points all year? No, he hasn't had one over 15. Like, Jameson Williams is one of these players that's so nice in our head and is like, oh man, he's such a great, like, man, he was so great at Bama and like fast guy, the great draft capital. Every fucking game he doesn't get there, doesn't get close, and I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of chasing Jameson Williams day because he's 3,500. So I'm sick of the Jameson Williams thing. And like, the results are the results. He hasn't had him at any point this year. Of course, though, Ken, it's the matchup for him to have it against Tampa Bay, so I get it, but fucking A. CMC Jones and no one else in that game feels like big brain genius. Too much steam, feels like a 17-14 slogfest. I don't know. I kind of think that the Niners put up 38 in that game. So I know it's a very specific one, but I think they're up like 24-0 at halftime or 24-7. And it's just like the Green Bay's never really in range would be how I feel about that game, but I get it. Who'll be my most roster wide receiver under 4K? Yeah, I guess if Gabe is still out with the PCL thing, Khalil Shakir, maybe. Yeah, but what if this is the time for Jameson Williams? I mean, look, it could be. It's just, you got to be responsible with your Jameson Williams ownership because I'm tired of having Jameson Williams killing lineups that are like good. And that happened for me in a few lineups this week where I had 80% Aaron Jones on the slate. So I doubled the field in Aaron Jones. So I had a lot of lineups that looked good. And then you have the guys around it. You're like, fuck, like, why do I have this much of this? Why did I have no Dobbs? I had Jaden Reed everywhere in my love stacks. It's definitely something that, Jameson Williams is one of those guys that I've now observed enough times that I'm ready to start going, let's stop going Jameson Williams. Maybe next year go again, but he's just fucking awful. Yeah, of course, it's how it goes. It's not triggering me. It's just, I need to warn you guys. This just keeps happening. Under 4K, yeah, it's got to be Shakir. Aguilar's fine. Aguilar gets more work than people realize always. He's basically Bateman. He's basically Odell. Aguilar 3,700 is also okay. And again, a good matchup for Jameson Williams. So it is what it is. Woods has to get more work. He did have an end zone target that did not go for a touchdown that last game against Cleveland. Obviously, we don't expect Houston to score a lot of points, but I think Robert Woods kind of a live Nico Collins fade where Nico gets blanketed, shut down, probably bracketed coverage in this game, I would think, from Baltimore. If that's the case, something's going to be open underneath. So Robert Woods, Dalton Schultz get a little bit more appealing. So Robert Woods at 3,500. Kind of interesting play. Reynolds had 7 targets last week. Yeah, Reynolds is a safety blanket. That's the one thing that we talked about going back to the ship chasing stream a couple years ago where I touted Josh Reynolds on the Thanksgiving slate. Jared Goff trusts Josh Reynolds. They were teammates in the Rams. Like they were, they like each other. Like Jared Goff wanted Josh Reynolds on the team. So in all these high leverage spots, like he goes Josh Reynolds' way. That's the case. Whereas Jameson Williams has to get there on the big plays. And then that has to be a game script thing that works out. And it also has to be an intent thing. And then Jameson Williams actually has to catch it and do something with it, which are a lot of things to ask for Jameson Williams. Yeah, me every week, this is it. I feel like that sums up DFS in general. Like 7, become a member, folks. I agree with Tyler. And I think I agree with Tyler. I agree with this neon flashing GIF. I think a lot of great points are made by both. But please do join down below. $4.99 a month. You get all my data and more stuff to come in 2024 as we get into best ball season. I think we're actually going to do rankings that you can upload if you want as part of the package here or something. So come join the fray here on Splash Play. Join the Squirt Squad. Kadarius Toney. No, I think we're done with Kadarius Toney for now. I think he's going to score a touchdown at some point in the playoffs, but probably has to be this week because otherwise, we're running a risk with the Chiefs not being there. Tight end, we have Kelsey Laporta. Laporta, again, looked like himself in that last game. A little bit less volume, though. 3 targets, had the 1 touchdown. But the one play that he broke for a bit of a run, like Laporta looked spry, but clearly the workload not there quite as well. I still be happy to go to Laporta this week coming up against Tampa Bay. Kelsey, 10 targets in that game. He's just not as good as Rashee Rice. The juice is not there, but the numbers still look okay. Kelsey is still what he is. Kittle here at number 3, 5,200. Big play upside against Green Bay. Kittle, I think, perfectly fine play as well. Mark Andrews has been activated off of IR, I believe. I don't know why it's not on these reports. Designated to return. So there we go. He's been designated to return, but only an individual drill. So Mark Andrews, important to watch. Obviously, if he's not in this week, Isaiah Likely a little bit more appealing, but you are not getting Likely at a discount. He's only $300 less than Mark Andrews. So kind of a bad scene. If Andrews is in, like Likely is going to probably get some work, become a better tournament play, but these guys are priced to not have value, basically. So they're not the most appealing. What is the name of that poker book? It is Elliott Rose A Game Poker. Which is, I actually have not read in the past few days. So I have to get back on that one because I think there's like workbook things you have to do at some point, which I'm not. I've not had the mental bandwidth to do. Dalton Schultz, Dalton Kincaid, both guys solid plays. Kincaid, decent amount of work, 6 targets in that last game, only caught 3 of them. Caught the touchdown though. Dalton Kincaid, a guy that we like. Though he and Dawson Knox clearly do cut into each other a little bit. The overall pie for receiver for Buffalo is a little bit tough because you do have Knox out there, you do have Kincaid out there. You have Shakir, you have Diggs. Diggs still feels like at some point he's got to have an outlier day. Lots of ways to spread the ball around for Buffalo, and that's always going to be the tough part with these guys being priced where they are. Yeah, Knox is $1,800 cheaper. Only had 2 targets compared to the 6 we saw for Kincaid, but did get a touchdown in the spot. But Kincaid, yeah, clearly ahead of Knox too in terms of like the usage as well. But both guys got a touchdown, so they both had some sort of utility. Cade Otton, Tucker Kraft. Not the sexiest plays. Musgrave, though, Musgrave, I think, is the one guy that Green Bay can't win this game, I don't think. But that one target that Musgrave had where he was wide open, this is what Musgrave was, I thought it was the opportunity he had for Green Bay this year. And it didn't happen because when he was playing inactive, Jordan Love was still kind of a bad version of Jordan Love. But now that Jordan Love is this guy who's ripping the ball downfield and making huge plays, I think that Musgrave, if you are going to play into some builds, and I will play some builds this weekend that have Packers winning, is like, look, I think the Niners are going to win. They're 10-point favorites. Like all the logic says go to the Niners, but you have to play contrarian builds for a little bit. If you're playing a build with the Packers winning, I think going Musgrave's way is kind of an appealing one because he can get there 1-2 plays, can get downfield, can make a lot of sense. So I think for Musgrave, finally seeing what he can do. And that play where he was wide open, that's just him as a route runner. Like he can get out and run an in route and then cut it up field. And it's like, oh shit, like Musgrave can break a touchdown. I think that there's one guy, I guess he probably won't take a surge. We talked about the guys who might take a surge in best ball because of their playoff performances. I would think Musgrave won't get a surge because I just don't think they're going to beat the Niners. But like he should be surging because like what we saw from him in that game while splitting routes, Tucker Kraft in a not good game script for the past game either. I think Musgrave is really an interesting guy. And I think he gave me the faith that I was like, he just didn't get there this year, but I really believe that he can get there next year. SAT analogy, if Jonnu is better than Pitts, then Knox is better than Kincaid. Math, sure. It is kind of a similar one, though obviously, very different players involved to tie down there. And defense is just for the sake of that. Ravens highest scoring or highest price defense on the slate. Still not that crazy at 3,500. Obviously, again, a lot of dropbacks for CJ Stroud. I would take the Ravens D. Probably not going to be chalky because they're expensive, but Ravens D should be very live because how much they drop back. Niners D should also be very live because Jordan Love is dropping back a lot right now. Lions D, again, these are all ones, I guess, coincidentally or perhaps purposefully, the top 3 price defenses are all the ones that are going to go against the QBs dropping back the most. So Ravens, Niners, Lions, I think have that logic that we saw last week for Houston, but obviously a much different price tag. I guess you can make the same case at the Bucks, though. Detroit's running enough now that I don't think the Bucks will get as many Jared Goff dropbacks. But if you want to target a Jared Goff meltdown, I believe the Lions win that game personally, but obviously we are trying to play less likely outcomes. Right now, no showdowns posted for the weekend. That's because they're not going to do them yet. But I think there will be showdowns. I'm very confident there'll be a Saturday night showdown and a Sunday night showdown would be my guess. And of course, there'll be the regular ones too, but the big prize pools or the bigger prize pools will be for the Saturday one and the Sunday one at night. All right, guys, I think that covers it all pretty well. So, of course, we will be back building lines for this, talking about more about this over the course of a week. Tomorrow, though, back to the world of rookies. So, rookie running backs. So, it's a class that does not have a lot of guys expected to go in that Bijan range, even be first-round picks. But should have some interesting guys to talk about. Of course, rookie running backs, always a thing that we've been pretty good at pinpointing the value of on this show. And sometimes they end up at Kendra Miller. Sometimes they end up at Devon Achane. Figure out the process starts tomorrow for running backs. We'll get that here. Of course, please do make sure you subscribe down below. Hit that like button. Of course, splash play on that march to 4K subs now, 5K subs, 10K subs, 1,000,000 K subs. And we can't do it without you. So please do subscribe here and hit that like button and help us grow here. Of course, fighting that YouTube algorithm every single day. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at Splash Play Pod. Hit that join button now below. $4.99 a month will get your name on this list. And I actually have to might update it here because I think we're losing some members because of people's free memberships ending. So please hit that join button down below. I don't want less names on here. I want more. So hit that join button. Get the custom emojis, VIP badges, and of course my data sheets every week, and more to come in this offseason. Rookie data as well. So please do that. Back tomorrow with more, guys. So I'll see you guys then. Check out Probably as well if you haven't yet. Of course, use the promo code SPLASH, save 50% on there. Best betting data you will find. It's available on your mobile app. Check it out at probably.com/subscribe. And back tomorrow for the rookie shit. So I'll see you guys then. Enjoy your days. Good luck.